everyone. Welcome back to Women, Emotions, Identity, and Love webinar number 5. Woo! We are so excited that you're here today, and we have really enjoyed doing this webinar series. This week we have a big announcement. Last week I told you that we were noodling an idea about how to serve you on an individual basis. So we put our heads together and have come up with an offer, which of course we think is spectacular. And we will cover that a little bit later in the webinar, so please stay tuned. Our topic this week is how are you handling your interpersonal skills, and more specifically, conflict in your relationships during this time of COVID-19. As we've seen either in the news or we've witnessed it, emotions are running very high right now, all around the world, not just here. And couple that with having a lot more togetherness with either our significant others or our children, as living situations have changed drastically during this time for some of us. For me, I am living with my adult sons. One is 21 and just graduated from college. He came home for spring break and never left. He had plans after he graduated to move to Canada or some mountainous region that is a lot cooler. He's basically a polar bear and loves the cold. But that has changed. And my 29-year-old was transitioning between moving from Denver to another location and was staying with me temporarily. And yeah, that changed too. So 8 months later, here we all are living together still. And I have to say, and I never thought I would say this, but I'm really grateful that they're here with me. I came down with COVID in March, and they were here to take care of me. And during my recovery, I needed a lot of help. And through that experience, I came to really value them and their company. It would be horrifically lonely if I was without them. We don't hang out a lot, but once a week, if I cook, they will come, cook and they will come and sit down with me and have a meal. And I just absolutely love those times with them. And it's just nice knowing that they're here, even though we're really busy and we're each living our own lives. And they have made a really huge effort to be good roommates. And I really appreciate that. They are helpful and they are respectful of my house, which are two very important things to me. And the three of us have figured out how to respect each other's alone time, which is very important when you coexist with others. My older son has a big personality, if you will, and we have butted heads a lot in the past. And so I was really concerned about us living together. But I've learned when to back off and when to let things go more than I ever have in my life. And he's learned not to be so reactive. I think having been so sick and them watching that and being frightened by that has made us all realize to not sweat the small stuff. That really rings true. So I appreciate them more, they appreciate me more, and it helps us be tolerant of each other. And of course, being tolerant to begin with helps with staying out of conflict altogether. Now, is it perfect? No, of course not. But I believe that tolerance and respect for each other's needs, even in a parent-child situation, is the key to harmonious living. So I'm going to ask Marianne, do you have anything to add to those thoughts?
Well, the tolerance, I think at this point, since I'm moving around, I moved from, well, I started when COVID started. I was living in Saudi Arabia, and I lived I mean, I lived in by myself, but I had a lot of people around, and we spent time together. We weren't worried about COVID. But after I left Saudi Arabia, I've been moving around, and I've been basically kind of living with myself. And so the tolerance that I have to have is pretty much with myself. And so it's a different it's a way different situation than living together with someone. And I'm just traveling around in these COVID times, so pretty much just tolerance with myself.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, so I'll give it to you, Gayla.
All right, all right. Well, you know, you bring up an interesting point, both of you. Tolerance is really important, and sometimes we don't feel really tolerant of other people, and sometimes we don't feel tolerant of even our own moods and our own situation because we're the hardest on ourselves. And sometimes I think we spend a little bit too much time telling ourselves to straighten up and get it together and sort of smile on your face and you know why am I acting like this? I mean, I think it was really helpful. I think it was this week or last that Michelle Obama came out and said, look, you know, I've been experiencing this low level depression since we've all been through this COVID thing. So I think it's important that we all realize that everybody's going through it and everyone has their own coping mechanisms. I mean, for me, my husband has been working from home since March 12th. And I'm married to someone who loves to travel. So that has really taken more of a toll on him than I thought it was going to. I mean, we're both Sagittarius people, so we love to travel, and we always had something on our calendars to look forward to. And then when this COVID thing, trip after trip or event after event got canceled. I know I was hugely disappointed. I was a speaker at the Denver Singles Summit, which was really a big stage for me. And that got moved. And so we had hope again. And then it got canceled. So that was really dashed my dreams of what was going to happen in 2020. And I started to notice that, you know, my husband was really struggling with this being at home. We love and adore each other and we love to be together, but just not having that something to look forward to go to together, to have a change of scenery. So I just finally said, hey, honey, this is really wearing on you. I can see that. And a few times you've been a little crabby. So I don't really like it very much when you're crabby about stuff, you know, that's really he would never have been crabby about in the past. So of course he's such a doll. He's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I did not even realize, you know, that I'm being a little on the crabby side about basically nothing. So we just sat down and we had a communication about what we were going to do about this. And so no, we can't go on these trips. These events are canceled. So okay, we had to come to acceptance of that. But what can we do? And so we made a plan of what we're going to do to handle it. And so actually this week, yes, it's Friday. This week we took a drive to a little town that we love called Boulder in Colorado. And we had a lunch date. And it really helped us both feel better because it was beautiful and the sun was shining and there was a very high compliance rate with mask wearing. So Boulder has a rule, you wear your mask anywhere in public, very high compliance, which made us feel better. And we didn't go in any shops, which of course is something I love and adore to do. We just walked around and we just saw the beautiful flowers and we had a lovely outdoor lunch. And the restaurant was high compliance, mask wearing, tables separated, and it made a world of difference. It was kind of like we went on a trip, but we didn't really go on a trip. And so he's already planned our date, our lunch date for next week. So we are going to do that. And so I just share that with you to say, sometimes you have to sit down with your partner and say, hey, what's going on? This is how I'm feeling. Maybe you have to address an issue like crabbiness, and come to a decision on what you're going to do. So this week, when we talked about the webinar, we decided we're going to ask questions again. So all of you on the webinar, put up your chat box, and we're going to give you some time to answer this question. So we would really like to hear from you. And so the question is, during this past few months, are you experiencing a conflict in your relationship? And so we just want you to type into the chat box what that is. And for those of you who've been with us, as you know, if you want to just send that to Vivian, that's fine. You need to click on the little button instead of everyone. So you can send a private question to Vivian and she'll read the question. But if you don't mind, if everyone sees your question and who it's coming from, just type in the chat box. Is there something going on in your relationship, a conflict that's happened? And then we're going to explore some of that and talk about what to do about that. So we're going to give you a minute to think. Okay?
1 minute on the clock. Well, we have our first comment, and I love this. I love that this person said that COVID has actually been a good thing and has brought them closer together. And there's certainly that. And I think that's kind of where my story was coming from, that I actually am closer with my sons as a result of being in this situation, and that I never thought that I would enjoy living with my adult children. But it's true. COVID has actually done that for me as well. And then let's see. Does anybody want to comment on that?
Well, what I was going to say is we also had an earlier question that we started to have some dialogue about last week, and that is, and you mentioned it as well, Vivian, is sometimes in these situations you have this need for some alone time, and I think that's fine. And I think the problem is that people can feel guilty about that, and especially women. And I don't want you to feel guilty about that. It's okay to want some alone time. In fact, my husband's here, and I don't even know where he is sometimes. Sometimes he's upstairs in the loft in his makeshift office, and then I want to ask him something, and then he's not up there. And then I check we have a little gym downstairs. He's not down there. And then I open the door, and he's set up office. He opens the garage door and sits out there and calls that his third office. And then sometimes he's on the patio. So I feel like I'm chasing him all around the house. And, to ask him a question, it's like, where are you? It's like finding Waldo. It's like finding my husband to interact with him. But I just say, hey, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. So we have a high level of communication about what each other's doing, and we don't have to wonder where each other is. In fact, it's kind of a funny story. He was so preoccupied a couple of weeks ago, he actually left the house without telling me. And I went looking for him, and I was freaking out because we had talked about it earlier in the morning, and I knew he was going to leave and go do this errand. But he never leaves the house without coming to tell me, hey, honey, I'm going to the store, I'm going here, and kissing me goodbye. So after I looked all over the house for him, and I'm freaking out, I was about ready to walk all around the house to see if he'd gone out there and keeled over or something. I was really panicking. I heard the garage door opening, and I'm thinking, what in the world? You actually left without kissing me? Are you nuts? When I was standing at the garage door, when he got out of the car and he said, the look on your face, I knew I was in trouble. So we really got a good laugh about that. I just laughed about it. I cannot believe you left this house without kissing me. That's it. You're going to pay for that.
Well, here's somebody else's challenge that they've been going through. They've had, COVID has revealed some limitations, and then it has also caused conflict, not only with himself, but also with a very close friend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Because your question was, what was the challenge? Are we ready to go on to the next question?
Yeah, I was
so we can solve that problem for her?
Yes. Let's just go ahead. Let's go ahead and go to the next question.
Okay.
Which was, excuse me. The next question was, how have you handled that conflict so far? So type in some things, because there are many different ways that people handle conflict in relationships. And so I think that's going to be a really fun discussion about how are you handling that conflict, and how is that working out for you? So we're going to give you a minute. How have you handled it, and how'd that work?
I can't wait for these answers.
I know. I'm excited. I'm excited to hear this too.
All right, we got some things to discuss here. Let's start with this one: couples counseling. What a great idea. I mean, if you are having conflict in your life and you're unable to make it through yourself, sometimes you need outside help, whether it's counseling, whether it's coaching, whatever you need and it's really nice to get an outside perspective, somebody who's knowledgeable, somebody who can guide you, somebody who can help you look at it differently, from a different perspective. Absolutely a great solution. And he mentions, yes, it's difficult at times. Well, what isn't when you're trying to improve your relationships? And as we all know, relationships are work. You cannot put them on autopilot and expect them to not crash to the ground. You got to keep your hands on the steering wheel. So, any thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely. So what I would say is, normally, and then we've all heard this, there are basically three ways that people handle conflict, and they're fight, flight, or freeze. And so you might want to think about what you've done in the past. Did you get into a fight with your significant other? Did you run away, which a lot of people do? They just shut down and they leave the conflict because they don't know how to handle it and they don't want it to get worse. Or they freeze, in that they just find themselves unable to talk about it, and so they ignore the fact that there's a conflict, and they just come back into the relationship and try to be all happy and, oh, isn't this fine and wonderful and lovey-dovey, and their partner's like, not so much, because we didn't address it. And I think in my experience, everyone has one of those go-to. You either just leave, said, or you refuse to talk about it, or you just open your mouth and everything that you're thinking comes out of your mouth. when really you should think about it some more before your mouth opens and you create wounds and scars in your relationship. And I know my husband and I have this conversation a lot before we were married, that you better be careful what you say to your partner, because you can create scars. And when you keep creating scars over top of scars, it's not going to heal. And there are things that people say that you can't take back. I mean, you can say you're sorry for losing your temper or whatever, but it's better if you don't do that in the first place, especially if it's name calling and things like that are really unacceptable in a relationship. So we talked about this in a previous call, setting boundaries. Like, how are we going to handle conflict in our relationship before there is actually a conflict? Talk about how we're going to do that and make rules in your own marriage. Like, a great rule is we are never going to call each other names. And if we're really, really mad, we need to be adult and say, I'm so aggravated with you right now that I don't want to talk right now. And then say, but we need to talk about this issue later, and set a time to talk about it later, and talk about it as adults and say, you know, I'm really feeling this way. When you act this way, it makes me feel this way. And we hear that. I think we've all heard that, but it's one thing to hear that as a strategy, and it's another thing to do it.
Yeah. And so, and that point being like one of our participants said, at that point you get help, you get therapy, or you get coaching, because you're right, Gayla, you can say that all day long, but putting it into practice and staying adult and staying calm and staying focused on what you need to stay focused on can be really tough, especially when emotions are running really high and you're not sure why. And there's a lot of times that we are reactive to something, and the actual situation is maybe 2% of it, but all the back stuff that has not been processed or dealt with is coming into play and blowing that 2% up to 1,000%. So the person might be like, what? I don't get why the reaction is so incredible right now. But it's, yeah, so you have to be reflective. And that's really true. I mean, you have to be very mindful when you're in those kinds of situations. And I love what you said about fight, flight, or freeze, because you're right. Those are the responses, and the more you can anticipate what your response is going to be. Like I'm a walk out the door. I'm a throw my hands up. I've had enough. I'm out, and I run away. If I'm cornered, I will stay and fight, and that is not pretty. So we don't want to go there. But I never seem to freeze. I never seem to do that. I do the bleh. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. But you know, emotions are emotions, and we have to learn to deal with them the best we can.
Oh, that's so true. I mean, that is so true. And I will say, for the people who have flight as their primary response to conflict, you need to really have some self-reflection about that, because what's happening when your partner isn't heard and they don't feel like, especially women, if you don't allow us to talk and be heard, then it's all going to get backed up. And then if we lose control of our well-intended strategy, you're going to get a whole lot of stuff thrown at you that's been pent up. And so that's not fun in a relationship. And so the first thing is really, really talk about how you're going to handle conflict in a relationship before there is a conflict. You know, that there's nothing more important than having your own personal rules. And I did a blog series a few years ago on, I don't know, there's 6 or 7, no, I think there are actually 9 rules of handling conflict in a relationship. And it's important to know what those are. And it's important to talk about those with your spouse and say, you know, this is how we intend to handle it. And it doesn't mean that somebody's not going to mess up. I mean, we all mess up, and we need to remember when our partner messes things up and doesn't exactly, you know, do the things that we agreed to, we need to treat them in the way that we would want to be treated if we are the one that made a mistake. And so I was asked a question by a friend recently. She was really tired of her husband wanting to be a couch potato every night after work. And so when she called me, she was super frustrated about that. And she said, I'm just going to tell him that I'm not doing it. I am not doing that. I am not sitting on the couch with you. You're a couch potato. I'm sick and tired of it. Blah, blah. I said, okay. I think it's a really good thing you called me and told me that. So I said, okay. You might want to think about coming from a place of love. You know, you love and adore him, and you need to stop and think, what do I love and adore about this person? And then set a time to talk about it and say, hey, you know, I would really like to do a few things, and I will sit on the couch and be a couch potato with you sometimes. And then I'd really like to go and do X, and I just love it if you go do it with me. Not, this is what I'm not doing.
And that's a perfect segue into, this is a great question. She's saying that she's a processor, and she needs time to think when she is entering into conflict. But when she does that, she's accused of shutting down. So she wants to know, how does she claim her need for her space to process without being accused of shutting down? And I think that really feeds in well with what you just said, to have those conversations ahead of time with your, and we're saying significant others. I mean, this is true with any relationship, friendships, children, other family members. It's, you know, whoever you're in a ongoing relationship with, but we're going to assume that's mostly significant others. But yes, I loved your point, Gayla, that you said, have those conversations ahead of time. But even when we do that, sometimes in the moment when emotions are flared, how can you give her some ideas of how to maneuver that?
Yes, of course. Because sometimes we make agreements, and we might have made the agreements in the beginning of our relationship, and it might be down the road. It could be down the road many, many years, and then it comes up and you're not thinking about that in the moment. But what I encourage everyone to do is to claim your own identity as someone who needs time to process. And don't be afraid to say, I need some time to process this. So I'm not prepared to have a conversation about it right now. I am more than happy to even put it on the calendar, though, when we are going to have a conversation about it, so that the other person doesn't feel like the person's just clamming up and shutting down. And I think the danger is that sometimes the people who need a lot of time to process something, they forget to come back to the problem, to the conflict, because when they come back, things are going maybe okay, going well, and it's very tempting to say, you know, things are fine, I'm just gonna let it go or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with letting small things go. I highly recommend it. But if it's something that caused that much conflict and you need time to process it, it's critical that you don't let it go, and that you come back and say, okay, honey, you know, let's talk about that. And again, I just encourage everyone, when you're talking about something, come from a place of love. You know, if you can, sit down on the couch and hold hands. You know, you can't really yell and call somebody you're holding hands with names. I mean, I know you might not feel like it, but you want to say something?
But it's really awkward.
Yeah, it's really awkward. Yes. And I'm like you, Vivian. I mean, if somebody, you know, doesn't want to talk about something, or tells me, like, the worst thing someone can say to me is, this conversation is over. Well, no, it's not. I'm not done talking about it. So we've had that discussion a couple of times early in our relationship because my husband loved to say, this conversation is over. Like, oh no, this conversation is not over. It could be over in this moment. So he's learned it's really not a good idea to say that, because later the conversation might be even more painful if he just let me talk, because most of us, we need to be heard. And just remember, even if you're not prepared to discuss, allow your spouse to be heard. Allow them to get it out. You know, you don't have to sit there and be yelled at. I don't know. No, we don't yell at each other. There's no yelling. No. Do not do that. Stop yourself. Do whatever you have to do. And yes, you can mess up sometimes, but there's no need for that. You're adults. You're in a loving relationship, or you know, you're in a relationship that's really gone off the rails and you need some serious help. There's no need for name calling and there's no need for yelling. But just know, if you don't let people be heard, it is going to come out someday, and not necessarily pretty.
Yeah, and that again ties right into another comment we have about how difficult it is for him to step back and just listen. But that's hard for him, but that's what he's found that he needs to do in situations probably exactly like that not trying to chime in, not trying to fix it. And it's hard for men because they're fixers, you know, they want to fix it. They want to, you know, they're very focused. They're, you know, let's get this done. Let's get it done now. And then they're awesome about letting it go and moving on, which women we are not good at it, guys. Sorry.
No.
We suck.
Yes. It's true. It's true.
And it's enviable. I gotta say, it's very enviable. But I know I've tried all my life, and I still not good at it.
Right. We have to work on ourselves.
Let me just chime in here for a minute.
Yes.
I just want to say that when it comes to identity, and you're in a relationship, it's not just that you understand your own identity. I mean, obviously, you have to self-reflect. Each person has to self-reflect. But in a relationship, you would have to understand each other, where you're coming from. So I think if you are a very outgoing person and one is a very not so outgoing, then you kind of have to really compromise. It's not just one or the other that needs to have all the focus. So when it comes to identity, I think it's just really, really important that you understand you, the other person understand themselves, and then you understand each other together.
And that comes back to that tolerance thing, that you tolerate. And that's why you're in the relationship with that person, because they're somebody you can tolerate, and they are somebody that, like you said, Gayla, over and over, you have to remember, coming from a place of love, coming from, I adore and love this person. And that if you can focus and remember that, it really does help. But again, those emotions, they creep in and they can get really ugly, and it's difficult sometimes. It just is, because again, you've got all that old stuff that's bubbling to the surface. You're triggered in some way. You're just not operating out of the logical place that you normally are.
Because I think it's really important to understand what it is that triggers you, and why does it trigger you? Is it something in the past that you just, you know, you're just so used to it, something that you have done all your life and you can't get out of that your norm, if you will. If you're used to it, and then all of a sudden you've been married for 25 years and you used to do certain things a certain way with one person, and then you divorce, and then you find another person to live with, and then you would have to get used to them, but you have that baggage, so you would have to kind of figure out where you're at and why you do the things that you do.
Absolutely. And that's of course what I coach about, and that is processing those emotions, where they came from, why you have them,
Yeah.
what your triggers are. But basically it all comes down to communication. Bottom
Yeah.
line,
Yeah.
communication. And we sort of have, that's the common thread here, isn't it? Sit down and talk, find out about each other, find out about yourself, communicate with yourself. That's the most important thing, because if you don't know who you are, nobody else is going to know who you are. If you don't
Yeah.
know why you operate the way you do, it's almost virtually impossible to be in a relationship with somebody else.
Yeah.
And to expect them to understand you and know you. So that work is imperative. And that work can start anytime in your life. Doesn't matter how old you are, you've got to get to that point of knowing who you are and why you operate the way you do. And then you can be the best self for somebody else.
Exactly.
Yes, I think that that's true. And I think the thing that we really want to ask ourselves is, if we're reluctant to have a conversation that, may be around a conflict, that may not be a fun conversation, why are we so reluctant to have that conversation? Are we afraid to look at maybe what we have contributed to the conflict? Are we afraid something bad's going to happen? Are we afraid that our partner is going to think less of us? And I think it's important to get some real conflict resolution skills in your relationship, because if you don't, your life is not going to be as easy as it could be in your relationship. And it's up to you to, each one of us has to get our own conflict resolution skills down. And we have to admit, what our first thought is, which may not be the best thought of how to handle it. And I guess the other thing I just want to say about it is, some people who are, back to the person who asked about, they want to chime in, instead of just listen. When you do that, it really shuts down the other person. But I think at the bottom of that need to chime in is, you feel like if you don't say something in the moment, that you're going to lose your opportunity to respond. And when I coach women, I say, you're not going to lose your opportunity to respond just because you don't respond in the moment. You can talk about it later when you're more prepared. So if you're too mad to talk about it, give yourself a break. And if you need to process it instead, give yourself a break, because you can be heard later when you feel better, more prepared, or less angry, or whatever it is. So I think people think, well, if I don't say something right now, I'm not going to get to. And so I would just suggest that you rethink that, because that is not correct. And you can say, hey, I would like to run something by you, honey. And so then most men will be like, oh, she wants my opinion. So then you can say, last week when this happened, I felt really disappointed that you behaved that way, and then they can hear you a little bit better. And so you don't have to have spouted off whatever ugly thing you were probably going to say. I don't know why you were being such a jerk to me. When we had our friends over for dinner, you're really a jerk. So instead of doing that, you can just don't say anything. Just, so.
I was going to say, I think that really fits into what you were saying before about the fight or flight, because when we are in fight or flight mode, we don't do well, right? We either run or we fight. And I love how you said you're going to be heard more effectively. When everybody calms down and is out of that mode, then yes, you are going to actually be heard. It's not that you won't be heard during the fight or flight, but even if even you're going to shut down how you receive information, because the other person is going to be in that same mode. They might be showing it differently, right? But there's something inside of them that their adrenaline's going there. So they are kind of shut down as well. So the absolute best thing you can do, and I agree with you, Gayla, is to just breathe just step away from it, breathe through it, no matter how long it takes. If it takes a week, hopefully it just takes a few hours, maybe a day, and you can come back together when you're both much calmer and you can hear each other and you can say things in a kinder way. It's just getting out of that adrenaline rush of being in fight or flight. So absolutely true. Do you have one more question for us?
Well, actually, I think we kind of got into it. My last question was going to be what strategies would be more helpful. And so we kind of just sort of morphed into that. So anybody can continue type into the chat box, while we're talking. But I thought it might be fun to talk about some marriage advice that all of us have been given. And I have to tell you, I think it's bad advice.
Ooh, what's that?
A lot of us heard from well-meaning people when we got into a relationship or got married to say, never go to bed mad. Well, I don't think that's very good advice, because sometimes stuff happens in the evening, and then if people think in the back of the mind, oh my gosh, to have a happy marriage, I'm not supposed to go to bed mad. I say, oh yeah, just go to bed mad, because it's better than yelling at your partner. And it's better than getting into a protracted argument until 1 o'clock in the morning or midnight. And so I think that advice was well intended, and if you can work it out, of course, it's better to have, like the super nanny says, kisses and cuddles, when you go to bed, not, I'm so mad at you, stay on your own side of the bed. But it's infinitely better than getting into an argument. So I just thought it might be fun to talk about that. And you guys can type, if you want to comment on that. But I don't think it's good advice.
I think I agree with you. And again, that's that personal time, alone time, personal space that we need to give each other, especially during those times. And one of you going and sleeping in the other bedroom is not such a bad idea, or sleeping on the couch. It sounds like, oh my God, I'm in the doghouse. But sometimes you need that space, and you need to just calm down and being away from each other. And I also think it's better to sleep in a different room so that because I know in my first marriage, if I was sleeping mad, I was literally, I was 1 inch wide on the absolute edge of the bed, as far away as I could be. And all night long, I was like this, and seething. And yeah, I think it would have been better if I had just gone to the other room and had my own, because you can feel the tension. It's all about energy, right? And you can feel that tension. You can just cut it with a knife and just remove yourself. It doesn't mean you're going to get a divorce the next day. It doesn't, but I think that comes from fear. It absolutely does. We think, oh my God, we're having an argument with the person I love. I am so frightened, they're going to leave me, or, it's the relationship's going to blow up, or something horrible is going to happen, when in actual fact, if you can just breathe through it, remove yourself, calm down, you can be so much more loving and be stronger at the other end of it. But you're right. People forget that, and they get really bad advice like don't go to bed mad. And we've been taught that. So that was awesome. And everybody agrees. Nobody is challenging us on that. And it looks like our time is kind of winding down. So if you do have any other final comments, please put them in the chat box for us. But I'm going to go into our offer right now, unless anybody else has anything they want to say prior. Wrap it up? Nope. Okay.
No.
Okay. Thanks for staying tuned. This is what Marianne and Gayla and I have come up with. We are offering you guys an opportunity to have individual coaching with us. Now you have to buy the 3 of us. We're a threefer. So, but for $97, you get an hour and a half of coaching, 30 minutes with each of us. that is an unbelievable deal because we are all quite a bit more than that on an hourly uh, coaching time. But we wanted to serve right now. We started our webinar with that philosophy. We told you that's why we're doing our webinar, is that we want to be of service during this time when everything is so unsettled in our world. And this is a way for us to offer up on an individual basis. I mean, this is fun doing the webinars and everything, but some of you probably are thinking, I'd really like to talk about that a little bit more, or maybe I'm not comfortable bringing something up that in a group setting. So we're making this offer 3 30-minute sessions with each of us, and we will work with you and all for low price of $97. So we're excited about that. Very, very excited to be of service to our following out there, because the Powerhouse Trio is here to do good. Right, ladies?
Right. Absolutely. And if you have a specific relationship question or a relationship issue that you're dealing with, especially in a love relationship, I would be happy to meet with you and help you with that for 30 minutes. And I know the same goes for Marianne with identity and Vivian with emotions. And this is not something that we normally do, but we really, as you said, Vivian, we want to be of service. We want to give you a way to really have a personal one-on-one conversation. And so I believe that they're going to get a link today to be able to access that offer, right, Vivian?
Yeah, the people on the webinar, you're going to be getting an email in a little bit that will have a link on it that you can sign up with us. And then we also will have a posted on Facebook. We'll post our link in a few hours for the people who watch the replay. And we have a huge amount of people who watch the replay. So that's going to be exciting. And you can always get a hold of us through our Facebook page, Women, Emotions, Identity, and Love. You can send us a message there. Yeah, I think we're pretty accessible.
Yes. And it's going to be easy. You can pick whoever you want to start and pick whoever you want to be second and third. And so if your identity question is heavy on your mind, then you probably want to schedule with Marianne first, and then, go to either one of Vivian or myself. So it's really up to you. It's completely optional where you begin. You can schedule with any of us and pick your second coaching time and your third coaching time. We want to give you maximum flexibility because we want to help you with the thing that's on the top of your mind the most.
Right. And the other thing,
I want to say too, I mean, the webinars, this is number 5 webinar, I believe. Yeah. And so I think what we have been trying to accomplish here is, or try to show, is that to have a healthy relationship, what Gayla is talking about, is that it goes back to Vivian's emotions. You understand your emotions, and you're wondering why you have those emotions, and then you move on over to the identity and understand what emotions you have, understand why you have those emotions, and ultimately have a healthy relationship.
Yep. Oops, she froze.
You're frozen in time, Marianne.
She's frozen in time. Oh, there you are.
Sorry.
There you are.
Sorry. Yeah. Did I get my point across?
I think so. Yeah. And on the registration page, we have a little form because we also want to maximize our time with you, because 30 minutes will go pretty quickly. So there's a little questionnaire that you can fill out so that we get that ahead of time and we can kind of just dive right in. So make sure you fill that out. That's also optional, but that's probably the optimal way to use the time with us. And then you'll just, and you'll book, we each have our own calendar. So it's separate, but it's together. So.
Yes, and the questionnaire that Vivian is talking about, it's only 3 questions. And it's just to help us know what you want to talk about. And again, it's optional. You don't have to answer that. You can wait till you get on the call if you want. But we just wanted to be the most prepared because we want you to get real value from your time with us. And I think that is the most important thing for the three of us. We actually want to help you. And so if you focus us in on what issues specifically that you want to talk about, that just helps us to focus in the conversation and actually be able to provide some value to you and help you in living your best life, which is what we all want to do.
Absolutely true. And I love one of the comments. Woohoo! So I'm excited about that, and we're excited to help you guys too. So, all right, I think that's it for this week. And thank you again, everybody, for being here. It's always a pleasure. This is just so much fun for us. And we just love having you here. And hopefully you'll join us next Friday at 10 o'clock Mountain Time. Until then, bye-bye.
Have a great weekend, everybody.